Hey crew, so just found out, thanks to Lydia, that I only had the following 20 questions up on my study guide. So this is the first 10, and I apologize for not having it on there before. Anyways, here we go. Say hi, Phoenix. Say hi. I'm not sure what that face is. Okay, anyways, here we go. It says, explain the tragedy of commons, how it is caused. So a tragedy of the commons, as we know from our goldfish activity, is when people take too much from the environment, and you take so much that it cannot recover. And so, again, this is a common area that everybody's sharing. So, tragedy of the commons is also example was Easter Island. We had the issue where the people cut down all the trees in the area. There wasn't enough time for them to regrow, and they disturbed the habitat so much nothing could grow. And then they had to eat each other and cannibalize for survival. So, tragedy of the commons is a big deal. Okay, we talk about that a lot in apes. Now, how can you prevent the tragedy of the commons? Well, that comes through sustainable living, and oftentimes that has to be policed governmentally, okay? And the government has to do things like enforcing policies that limit the amounts of things people can take from the environment and regulate that kind of stuff. But it just comes down to sustainability, doing things that we can continue doing, using more renewable sources of energy, eating more vegetarian, all those kinds of things can make a big difference. All right. Why do people clear cut forests? Well, obviously for money in different levels, whether that's clearing room for farms, whether that's cutting down forests to sell. Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Shh. Whether you're clearing down forests to make room for some new construction or suburban area. And as we know, when you do clear cut areas, you can erode the surrounding areas because the tree roots hold all that soil in place. If I can actually tell there's been a lot of erosion in the area by looking at the river. And if the river is filled with sediment, okay, and there's a word that we use there, it's important to remember, that word is turbidity. So if the water is turbid, that means there's been a lot of erosion from the area because there's a lot of stuff inside that river. How does clear cutting relate to global warming? And as we mentioned before, trees sequester. In other words, they store carbon dioxide, right, for long periods of time. And so by cutting them down, not only do we eliminate a carbon sink, absorbing carbon, but we also have those trees being broken down by bacteria, returning that carbon dioxide to the air. So it's kind of a double whammy. Okay? Excuse me. Oh, you can also burn them, not just let them decompose. Either way, we're missing a reservoir there, a sink. Okay, let me see. What was the Green Revolution's mission? The Green Revolution was designed to help support the growing populations in some of our developing countries like China, India, and the continent of Africa. A number of countries on there were also going through this. And let me see, what were the methods used to help accomplish their mission? Well, in the Green Revolution, we provided a lot of seeds, okay, in some cases genetically modified, but we provided a lot of seeds and fertilizer and other things to help people deal with their food issues. And what were the positive results? Well, obviously, you're feeding lots of people with lots of food that they need. So that's going to be positive. You're saving lives. What were the negative results? Well, a lot of these were monocultures and very similar, so that required a lot of use of pesticides and a lot of use of herbicides. So, with all these different chemicals being flooded into the areas, it affected the local ecosystems. It disturbed the sustainable farming. Like if we remember the Toxic Tears video, farmers have been farming in India the same sustainable way for millennia. And of course, that couldn't keep up with the growing population demand, but it does throw off certain sustainable farming practices, at least cultural farming practices as well. So there were certainly some negative results. And as we know, pesticides are carcinogens that can cause cancers and other respiratory illnesses for people who use them. So there were negative results there for the humans as well. Okay, when farmers use machines, they can gather greater amounts of food, which is great. But the environmental consequences using big machinery are, well, number one, we have to mine. Okay, we have to mine to get all the iron and all the different metals that we need to build these big machines. And as we know, mining causes lots of tailings. It disturbs the environment. It can't be reclaimed perfectly like it was before. So there are a lot of environmental issues dealing with the mining for these big machines. Also, we have to power them with fossil fuels. And as we know, fossil fuels is not great in terms of global warming. And so there are some big issues we still deal with in terms of using these big machines. Number 6, in terms of agriculture, what are the impacts from the following practices? Tilling. As you know, tilling's when you're just you're just drawing those little lines through the earth, okay, so you can put your plants in them. Anyways, tilling is helpful because it helps the farmers get the soil all loosened up and ready to plant. However, it's also loose, which means it's very easy to erode. Which is not very effective. Overall, maintaining your soil, because that's the number one thing that farmers want to maintain. Slash and burn farming, just cutting everything down and burning it, right, to return some of those nutrients to the soil, isn't effective as well. It is fairly effective in terms of fertilizer, but it's not great for the environment because you're releasing all this carbon dioxide into the air. Global warming is an issue. Fertilizers. Now, using fertilizers can be helpful when we have to generate a lot of food quickly for growing populations, but fertilizers can run off, right? When the rain lands on the fields, it can carry the fertilizer into lakes and streams, causing eutrophication, which is where you get the algal blooms, and then the algae die, and the bacteria eat up all the dead algae, using up all the oxygen in the environment, killing off all the fish and other things that live there. Number 7, what percent of our water on Earth is from irrigation? So that's a majority of the irrigation that we do. And obviously it's because we have to really keep track of these plants. In fact, I don't know why I don't know that number off the top of my head. I think it's actually in here if I pull it up. But we only have a limited amount of drinking water, as we know, on the earth, okay? And if we look here, blah, 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 do I have a number? There we go. All right, so most water in Kansas is used for irrigation. This is certainly by no means across the world, but it's probably pretty close to this. Somewhere around 3/4, I would imagine, of the water we use on earth is for irrigation. We have to keep these plants and our food crops growing, and in places that we don't farm lots of food, or at least you shouldn't be able to farm that much food. So we have to throw tons of water at it to be able to grow as much food as we need to keep our large population going. Okay, let me see. Describe 4 types of irrigation and give their evaporation / runoff lost. Okay, so if we look at drip irrigation, all right, that's where you have the little tubes and they got a little hole in it and it just drips irrigation in certain areas. In terms of evaporation, that's going to be almost none. Runoff, that's going to be almost none because most of the water is absorbed straight by the soil because it has nothing else it can do. Flood and furrow irrigation, as we know for both of these, they're very similar. Okay, similar enough to consider them the same thing. Essentially, when you're digging that ditch and you're filling it with water. And when we talk about that, evaporation specifically, you just got water exposed to sunlight all day. That's going to be tons of evaporation. Not as much runoff because it's contained within the specific area, but there's tons of evaporation going on. And then down here with spray, okay? Here, you're probably going to get less evaporation just because you have, again, the little water droplets everywhere, but it will evaporate. Just not as little as drip, but it will evaporate. And runoff loss, there will be a little bit lost to runoff. It's kind of, in fact, probably the most of all of them in terms of what's lost to runoff. But I'd say between all of these, as we mentioned before, spray is the most effective way to water your fields, okay? Because you can get a large amount of water with little evaporation and little runoff. Furrow and flood, as we know, you lose a lot to evaporation, and drip, it's not a whole lot of water, and it's hard to get lots of crops with it, but at least you can get something going, okay? Irrigation positives, produce lots of food. Okay, irrigation negatives. This is the big one here. Waterlogging. So if you throw so much water onto the area, as we know about concentrations from biology, diffusion and osmosis, if you waterlog your fields, you're going to have issues, specifically getting oxygen to your plant roots because you need a little bit of air to be in that soil. And when you fill it and flood it with water, the oxygen is not able to transfer into the roots like you would like. Salinization, again, going back to this idea of diffusion and osmosis, whenever you're throwing water from a freshwater source, that freshwater source has, oh, sorry, baby. Oh, on camera. Face first. Oh. Okay, hold on. Okay, come here. Come on. You okay? Better now? All the tears? Yep. Okay. All right. So, salinization. Remember, fresh water is not perfectly fresh. There's a little bit of salt in there. So, as long as we're using... That's right. It's right in my ear. Ouch. Okay. Salinization, when you get the little bit of that salt in the fresh water in your fields over and over and over again, that water is going to... the salt is going to ruin your fields. Okay, because again, water diffusion and osmosis, you're dealing with concentration. So if there's too much concentrated salt, it's gonna in the soil, it's gonna pull water out of your plants. Okay, water moves from high concentrated areas to low concentrated areas. So that would be the soil if you have too much salt in it. Anyways, continuing here, depletion of aquifers. As we know, Mexico City is currently sinking because they're drinking up all the water underneath them and running out quickly. Okay. And this is happening again in what's that number one most important aquifer I told you, remember, in the United States of America? That was the Ogallala. The Ogallala aquifer. In fact, I think it's on right here. Running on empty, the Ogallala aquifer is being drained by irrigation. And when that goes, we go. Okay? And I think that was through number 10 there, and the rest I think I went over with the group. So I feel pretty confident about that. And regardless... Oh, that's my hand. These are always available for review on Canvas, okay? So, if I can, we're going to say adios, and I wish you best of luck. If you have any questions, let me know, okay? Mavi, say bye.
Bye.
Phoenix, say bye. Say bye. Don't smile at me. What you got? Bye. Okay, adios.